Cool. I think we may be live. Need to share this with you guys in the chat. Drop a message in the chat if you are if you're watching live. There we go. What's up, guys? So what I think I'm going to be doing in this video is basically just, fiddling around with CableReady. I am working on basically rebuilding the Trello clone that we did in Vue with Stimulus and CableReady and AnyCable. So like we were using AnyCable to broadcast JSON over to the browser to re-render, when you were using Vue, and it's definitely doable with CableReady and Stimulus and that, but it's a little bit different. So I'm kind of learning how to do that and approach it from a different standpoint. Now the cool thing about CableReady is like we can use this to basically trigger HTML DOM updates from the server side. So the server decides. And normally with AnyCable, you would be doing something like broadcasting JSON and letting the Stimulus controller look at the JSON and determine what to do with it. And that's fine, but it's just a little bit more JavaScript work that you don't need to do. And that's where CableReady comes in. So we'll be able to do things like, Morph is a good replacement of existing HTML with new HTML. So if you were to take like a Trello card and be looking at that card and someone else updates it on a different, browser in a different computer or something, then that HTML could be broadcast to you and update it in real time in your browser. So we'll need kind of an example app here to get started. So let's run Rails new. Let's say CableReady example. I've got a screencast coming out next week on CableReady as the basics. Monroe, good question on upgrading to Rails 6. I think maybe I did a screencast on that in the past, but for the most part, like I use Rails diff. I'll look at the Rails upgrade notes and stuff and make changes if I need to, because some of them are breaking changes, but a lot of times I'll just go through and update my app using Rails diff, and I'll take my version, what version I'm upgrading to, go through all the configs and make sure that I'm upgrading to the latest Puma and whatever else Rails would do if I generated a new app, get my configs up to date, and my gems and whatever else. And it's really not too bad, and I think I covered that in a previous screencast. So while this gets up to date, let's take a look at the setup docs. CableReady does empower Stimulus Reflex, and so you get a lot more control over it, because Stimulus Reflex is like, it'll refresh your entire page, and then it will also allow you to trigger things on the server without writing any JavaScript, which is good, but like the entire page refresh is not something you always want to do. In fact, it's probably more rare you want to do that. At least on a page that's shared and needs to be updated in real time with other people. So that is, not something that you always want. And CableReady has kind of got all of those tools underneath that you can use instead to trigger individual things. So let's go into CableReady example and run these two commands. And do like let's do a card channel or something. And it scales, obviously, Andrew, because, AnyCable. You just good luck deploying it. So if we generate like a card channel, we can have an action cable channel that we can broadcast stuff across. And this will need some sort of stream channel in the Redis PubSub channel. So we can call this like cards. We'll want to generate a scaffold or something that we can actually do. So we'll say maybe card name, something simple, Rails DB migrate, and let's maybe go to our routes and change the route to cards index. Run our Rails server, and we should be at localhost 3000. I'll probably be doing a chat room example with this. It's not a whole lot different if you were going to use CableReady compared to Action Cable and just inserting the items through JSON. Not a whole lot different. Let's actually create a user here because I have the Action Cable WebSockets connected to devise. Okay, and we'll create a test card. So if we create a card here, basically we can, let's go into the index actually. So cards index, let's get rid of this table and we'll render out the cards. So render cards, and we need to define app views cards, card.html.arb. Oops. Save that. And then we'll have like a class card body, card.name, something like that. Okay, so we're set up with a basic example here. So what we can do with CableReady is actually if some other user in another browser or whatever, different computer, anything like that, could be a mobile app too, we can have our card model have an after update event that will broadcast a change with CableReady. So the way you do this is you include CableReady broadcaster, and then you can call this CableReady method anywhere, and you have to give it the same channel name as you do from here. So cards or whatever you're streaming from, you would have cards here, and then you can say like morph selector will be some sort of selector, so card underscore ID, and we would have the new HTML. So we could render the same partial. So application controller.render self should render the same one. So if we have an ID that matches that selector on our partial, and we say ID equals DOM ID for the card, that will generate an ID. And if we refresh this page and move our stuff around so we can see both of these at the same time, we can open up a Rails console, and if we say card.last.update, or actually this isn't going to work yet, this will broadcast or try to broadcast. We need to call CableReady.broadcast before I forget, and then we also need a stimulus controller that will listen for these CableReady broadcasts. Let's do that first before we try this out. So we need to run Rails Webpacker install stimulus, and this will install stimulus. So we'll get a hello controller. Let's just rename that to cards controller. we can import CableReady from CableReady. And then basically we need to set up, or no, we don't need this actually. Getting confused here. We need this inside of the channel instead. So CableReady from CableReady here. Then if data has a CableReady attribute, we can say CableReady.perform data.operations. That's the JSON that the broadcast will send us. So we don't need this controller actually. Let's get rid of that line. We can leave it there, it doesn't really matter. But now if we were to run the car.last, pull up the browser, .update, name is hello world, we should see that that gets broadcast, and it did, but we don't see it on this side. So the way we debug that, we'll refresh our page, pay attention to the cable messages, make sure we're connected to the card channel, and it confirmed our subscription. We want to make sure that we are streaming from cards, and we can try this again, make sure we get this, and we do. So it says hello world now. So hello world 2, yeah, there we go. 4, whatever. So we can now broadcast these changes automatically whenever we update this record. So it's pretty cool. Then we can simply go into our card.rb and we can say after destroy, let's put a buy bug in here. And we want to just see if we still have access to that ID. So let's let's destroy the last card, .destroy. Make sure we still have the ID, and we do. So that means that we can go do something like this, where we take the ID, and instead of doing the HTML, we can call their remove helper and broadcast removing that item from the page. And you can see that in the list of actions here that we can call. So we just need a selector. This one is optional, and we don't need that. So if we add this, we can create a new item on our page. Say test, and it needs to be on this page. And now if we call car.last.destroy, should remove it from the page immediately. So this is going to be a really cool thing that we can use in the Trello clone to actually do the movement. So we'll probably be using stimulus reflex when you do your drag and drop. It will trigger the stimulus reflex itself to update the card wherever you drag and drop it to. And then when that changes, we'll broadcast the change out to all the other users. So we'll move that individual card from one list to another, move its position, that sort of thing in other browsers, but we won't be using stimulus reflex to trigger a page refresh. If we did do that, then it would blow away like a modal. Interesting example that's a bit more than the basic examples that we've seen so far. So there's a bit of a like mindset change you have to use. You can't just like shove only stimulus reflex at the problems. So this is good. Now, Joey had a question on, the difference between AnyCable and CableReady. AnyCable is like a backend for AnyCable. So AnyCable is the WebSockets. They're processed by Ruby. AnyCable is a replacement for the Ruby backend of it, and it will run it in Go or Elixir. So it can basically run more clients in less memory. Then CableReady is actually a tool that builds on top of that to actually trigger these JavaScript changes. Otherwise, AnyCable or AnyCable is just sending messages back and forth between the browser and the server. Nothing, specific there. So Thanks, Monroe, for the $1.99. I appreciate it. So performance is, pretty awesome. Obviously, Basecamp's using this for their customers. You get a lot more performance if you use AnyCable as the backend, and Stimulus Reflex and CableReady, I think, both support that just fine. So you can use that if you grow or have growing pains with ActionCable itself. It's interchangeable. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of CableReady. There's some details of this that I am working on, or just before we were recording. Some of these things you have to get right. So, for example, this channel that you stream from and the card itself, you have to make sure that these selectors match. Now, I wanted to use the DOM ID like we were doing in the partial. So card html.erb. Let's refresh these. And we're using DOM ID here to generate the DOM ID, but the selector actually needs that hash symbol in front. And we can use the same method here. So action view record identifier and call DOM ID and pass in self here. So what I did initially was I said just DOM ID self to match this and forgot the identifier. And if we do that, we're actually going to see an error in the JavaScript console. So if we call, do we have any cards anymore now that we've deleted them? No. So we'll create another test card. We'll go back to the home page. And if we say card.last.update name is test2, that will update it. And actually, I wonder, let's see. I need to reload this so we can have the broken backend. So here we go. CableReady morph failed due to missing DOM element. Well, that's correct. So our selector is not correct that we passed over in our morph. And it tells us the action we tried to take, a morph, but it doesn't tell us what DOM element was missing. So one of the things that I've done to trying to improve this is basically looked in the CableReady JavaScript, and I want to modify this error message so that it tells you the correct element that you couldn't find. So what was the selector that you made a mistake with, so you can debug this easier. Now, one of the things that I end up doing often, and I need to make a screencast on this, is that for times when you're like, well, I would like to modify CableReady and improve that error message, you've got your node modules here. So you can actually go into CableReady, wherever it is, there it is. And you can go into CableReady.js and just modify the code here. And this you might have done in Ruby, editing the Ruby gem that's installed on your system, just to throw a buy bug in there or something. I do that fairly often, but you can do the exact same thing in your JavaScript modules. So if we come down here, we can go and modify this JavaScript. So if we wanted to say console.log, whatever here, the error, we could add that. We could run bin webpack to force recompiling that, because when Webpack notices changes, it's not going to be looking at your node modules. It doesn't expect these to change, so you will have to trigger a recompile that way. And is my screen? Yeah, my screen is too large for my stream. Let me resize this for you guys. Getting there. There we go. That's better. Now you can see my whole thing. Okay. So, So we have the ability to go and edit node modules for development purposes, which is really nice. So if we refresh this and we try this one more time, we can run our Rails console. We can run that update. And this time we're going to see type error, cannot read property dispatched event of null. But that is actually coming from our console.log that we just added with the exception there. So this is a nice way for us to, fiddle with these libraries that we want to make changes to, and we want to fork, but we don't have a good way of specifying the the override version. So we want to use this gem, but if we're using stimulus reflex and we install that, our node modules or package JSON needs to point to our fork of it, and this is a good way to prototype that without even having to deal with that stuff. So the entry that we're looking at is this detail object, and we don't have access to it in the catch unless it's outside. So if we pull that outside, we can use the detail here to replace that lookup, and we can have for selector and print out detail.selector. And so I found detail.selector here. So it's basically saying if CableReady sent over a message that had selector in it, we need to go look up that selector. We're going to try to see if we can find it with XPath or document query selector. And accordingly, it will go and find that element. If it doesn't, it's going to throw an exception or tell you it was missing and so on. And if there is an error, we'll get to this point. So with this change, we should be able to run bin webpack again. We can open up the Rails server once that's done recompiling. And we'll go refresh our JavaScript so we get the latest. And this should have an error again. And we'll run that. And now we get to see more failed due to missing DOM element for selector card 3. So this is the selector. You could copy paste this string and run document.query selector, and you would see that it is null. So it's going to print that error out anytime the query selector or XPath can't find the element, which is what we want. But this makes it a lot easier to debug, and we can fix things much easier that way, or debug things, because we're like, well, there's not that element on the page. Maybe we're listening to events that we don't need to. And this is just not necessarily a bad thing. Like, this isn't really an error, but it's more of a warning that the server broadcasted a change that you don't know what to do with because that element does not exist. So that is a way to fix that. And then I've already forked CableReady, but if we go to CableReady's repo and we clone it, I can show you how we deal with the prettier standard linter. So let's go back up and get clone, and we'll go into CableReady, and we can make those same changes here as we prototyped out in our file or in our fake node module. And we will change this to detail.element for selector detail.selector, and we're good. So this is now what we could create a PR for, but the GitHub actions for this will run prettier against this. And originally when I pushed this up, it failed. So here's the failure. And basically, if you look in the GitHub actions, you can see, where it failed and what command it ran when it failed. So here's the command it ran, and here's the command that Yarn actually generated to run. So we can do kind of the same thing. We can just run that here in our environment. We'll need to install Yarn or run Yarn to install the dependencies like prettier standard. And that needs to be run in the JavaScript folder. That's right. Oops, let's clear and run Yarn here. There we go. Installing prettier. And basically we'll run the same command that the CI does. So it'll be nice for us to verify that. Let's run Yarn run prettier, because that's not the same folder, of course. Home runner is the GitHub user. So this basically says we have code style issues. So our changes that we wrote have some issues, and most likely it's just over the line length. This is more than 80 characters or whatever. So one of the things we can do is remove this check. I had to go Google that. I've never run prettier standard before, so I didn't know what it was. If you run this, it's annoying, but it will just tell you it failed, and it doesn't tell you what happened. It just said there was an issue, and it doesn't tell you why or where or anything like that. So we can assume it was our change. This is probably passing before we made changes. So if we run that now, we can see that we get some changes here. So we moved that, and this basically took our really long string and moved it to its own new line, and that passes the 80 character line limit or whatever we've got. So we can add those changes there, and that should do it. So I already made a commit for that, but that worked very easily and did the trick. So hopefully that'll get merged and maybe make debugging a bit easier. And you can always look into the README and understand what they want you to do. So they have coding standards here. They don't really have a testing or anything example here, but we can always look into the rake file and see. As it appears, there are no tests for this, so we don't have to worry about it too much, and there are no items in the test folder either. But this is also a very lightweight library. So we have the broadcaster, which adds that CableReady that we were calling, and this just gives us a new CableReady channel. And then this is that object, and the individual channel right here is where most of these things happen. So it's helper methods to define things like outer HTML and inner HTML that all get broadcast over. So as we can see here, these are adding operations. They're kind of just queuing them up for being done later when you call the final broadcast, which will go through each one of those, make sure that it transforms the keys correctly and so on, and then it sends it over the Action Cable server. So this is pretty nifty, pretty straightforward on how all of that works. I haven't poked through all of this yet, but it's not bad. So I'm kind of curious here where the channel, okay, so the channel name comes through there, gets saved and passed into this, and it uses Action Cable server broadcast to that name. Nifty. So there's nothing too fancy about this. This is just forwarding a lot of stuff across the wire for you and just helper methods for that. And the JavaScript portion of this is what does the real magic. So it's not too complex, and there's not a whole lot of, tests needed for some of this stuff. But yeah, it works nicely, and it's very, very, very simple, which is great. So one of the things I noticed here under channel was this set cookie, which I don't believe is documented publicly yet. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe something we could add to the docs. And also there may be opportunity to add a whole bunch more, operations. This is really probably the core of them that we would need for anything. And there's probably not a lot of situations where we need other things. So for example, on the Trello clone, what we'll probably end up doing is when you move a card, we'll probably remove it from its location and then insert it in the correct location in a different list or in the same list. And so we'll probably end up using the remove and insert adjacent HTML for that. And that should do the trick for what we need, I think. There may be some other, ways of tackling that, but it might work pretty well. We could do a morph for the list, and that would be a pretty good option too. The morph would take all of those cards and update them for the list and the list title. And, we could use that, but if you had inline edits, that would maybe blow away some of your changes. So if you were on this page and you clicked on, the title or something and edited inline, that would be a problem. And there are some things like that with Trello that Rails too. So this goes in a little bit more depth into CableReady than that screencast, but it's basically the same thing. Hey Roman, how's it going? All right, YouTube is complaining about bandwidth. Some internet troubles lately. So there's some other things that you can do with this that is kind of cool. You can broadcast changes that are like basically broadcasting a style change or like a data attribute change or something. Or you can even trigger events if you want to, which is cool. Let's do one of those. So if we go into not CableReady, let's close that and let's go back into our application. We can maybe after update, we'll broadcast a different change. We can do a set style. And let's go look at the docs for set style. Style mutations, set style. Selector, name, and a value. So we could say background is name is background. I think we can do that with symbols. Value is red, something like that. And then anytime that we broadcast an update for a card, this should now be changed as well. So we'll reload our console, change this to test 4, and we should see that broadcasts the morph background is red. We're still getting our selector error, so let's go and make sure that we put the hash symbol back here. So we have that. We'll broadcast an update again to test 5, and there we go. So now we can change that color for the style. Now it might be that we want to add multiple styles, for example. So maybe we want to pass a array of styles, and we could go through each of those and set those styles. That could be an example that we might want to do, more than one of these, and it would get kind of tedious having to define a bunch of these if we needed to change multiple styles. Chances are you're not going to do that and you would use a class, but that would be a good example of something we could add to CableReady. So let's go and just fiddle with that and see what it would take to do that. So we'll go to CableReady. Let's take a peek. So first things first, we need to go into CableReady, channel. What's up, Ronald? Hello. I saw your email and I will be replying back to you later. Good to see you in chat. So for set styles, we could do a plural version of this. And really, this would be all we'd have to do. So there's no validation in these options for the required arguments or anything. That may be something that this gets improved with later on. But honestly, it's not something that's even really needed. As long as there's good errors in the JavaScript. So if we go to CableReady in the JavaScript, we can add under DOM operations, we can go find the set styles. There we go. And we can go through this and make a set styles one. Now we could go through our detail for this. So we'll say detail, and we'll probably just comment out this for now. And probably the easiest way to prototype this stuff is like we were doing before. We'll go into our applications code. Let me switch these tabs. What's up, BGM? People all around the world. This is cool. So if we go into our CableReady and our node work of the left to let's see, are we back? All right. So from the current directory that we're in, we need to go to CableReady, I believe, and we can run bundle to see if that finds the correct version of the gem, and it does. So we can restart our Rails server. Let's restart our Rails console. Awesome. Glad to have the stream back. I need a more reliable internet connection. Okay. So if this works correctly, we should be able to run our update, and that should call set styles, and that should pass over set styles with an array of selector styles, selector and styles. Great. So what appears to have happened is that we get DOM operations name is not a function. So the JavaScript portion of this needs some work. So we need set styles to be recompiled. Let's run bin webpack again. And once that's done, we'll refresh. We'll try updating this to test and see if we get the same error or a different one. But there we go. So we get our object. So now we have our list of styles that we want to change, the background to red, the color to white, and so on. So we now have our set styles working. And honestly, we probably just need to go through DOM operations, set style, and call that function for each one of these. And we can probably find that example here. So they have the detail right there. And the element, so detail takes the element, the name, and the value. So we would need to basically pass in those same objects to pull that out, or pull that off. So here, we can say styles, styles.for each style. we'll need to pass in the object here of element is element, and name is style.name, and value is style.value. So what that would do is basically loop through each one of those styles, just pass it into the other JavaScript method here, and pass in the necessary items to make that work. So we'll have to just try this out and see if it works, but I think we have that working correctly. So let's try this one more time. We have the new version of the JavaScript, update to test 2, and there we go. It worked without a hitch. So it changed both the background color and the text. And that might be a feature that we would like to add to CableReady, so you can submit multiple styles at once. There are some things that I'm not sure if I like or not. So the style mutation has a name and a value, but potentially your Ruby code, you would prefer to have this be a list of styles, and this was maybe just a hash, and you will loop through the object. You said background is red, color is white, and hopefully this would look a little bit more like regular CSS, because it's kind of what you expect to write. So for this, we'd actually need to loop through all the properties on an object. JavaScript loop through object. Yeah, so you can do entries, and that will give us an array of key and value. So we could have an object like that and go through each one of those and basically pass them in. And I think that would be a little bit more usable, but we want to make sure that this is available in all the browsers we want to have compatibility with. So there's no support in Internet Explorer for that, but we would want to check CableReady and see what it supports. Maybe it is on the main docs page. We'll try that. Yeah, I don't see any exact, compatibility, browser compatibility list. So this may be something we could use if we're not trying to support Internet Explorer. It does support Edge, which would be fine. And it looks like we could add this polyfill if we wanted to support IE maybe. What's it say? If you need support for IE less than 9, you'll also need object.keys polyfill. So potentially we would need this polyfill and another to do that, but I think it's probably okay to do this. And I would rather have my code looking like this than the array of objects. Array of objects. So let's grab this and try updating our JavaScript accordingly. So here's where we'd want this. And we would go through the styles, and we'd have our name and our value there. And we could just change this to that. And that should do the exact same thing. So we'll loop through each of those and push them through. Okay, so let's try that. See if that works. We'll recompile our JavaScript. We'll reload our console to run the new code and try it out. Refresh this page so we can see those changes. It changed test to 3, but it appears we have an error with our JavaScript. Error in set styles. Style is not defined. What are we looking for? Okay, yeah. We don't need style there, of course, because we now have extracted those from the array. So we'll run bin webpack again. We'll try and update this one more time. Okie dokie. Test 4. There we go. That's much better. So now we have a working version of that, and it's actually like super clean, I think, in the Ruby syntax. And this is only a very small patch to the JavaScript in a single method on the Ruby side. So this, to me, feels more like what you would want, and potentially, I mean, honestly, it seems like you could get rid of this or get rid of the set style entirely. Maybe you would keep it for backwards compatibility, but you could probably drop that from the docs and use this, which would be more flexible to set a bunch of styles. And you wouldn't break anything if you kept the old one, especially because this depends on the old one to actually apply the styles. So this works well, and maybe something we will propose as an update to CableReady to set multiple styles at once. So if we were to do that, might as well go ahead and try doing that. Let's open up the CableReady code. So we've got CableReady here. Let's go into the JavaScript and we'll copy in the JavaScript we wrote inside of our node module temporarily. So put that here and set styles, save that, and I think that's it. If we go into set styles, make sure that's there, that should be it. So if we're making this change, we would want to, there's no change log, probably need to introduce a changelog to this repository soon. At the very least, it needs to be added to the docs. So right now, there are no mention of the docs here in the main repo, which is fine. But we're going to need to go into the docs folder and take a look at this. Now, I know they're using Gitbook for the docs, and so we will probably want to, update this to include our set styles. We don't add set styles there, and we would want to go through the usage, style and mutations, and add an item for set styles, sets multiple styles on an element. So set styles, and we would have styles, and this one's going to be a little bit different. We can give examples. Background is red, color is white. And for these, we would probably need to explain that it needs to be a key value, like a Ruby hash format of entries, not a name and a value. So that is one of the things that is a little bit different here. So this will actually be a bit different of a structure. So we probably need to define this a little bit differently in the docs. I don't know exactly, but I don't know how I describe it exactly, but it's kind of intuitive when you give examples like this. People should be able to understand it, but it wouldn't be bad to set this accordingly. So one thing that would be nice to know and double check and make sure it works is if we go into here and we say background is nil, does that actually clear out the background style? So if we reload here and we go back here, run test is 5, yeah, it looks like it clears out the background style, which is good. We want to make sure that it does that as well. So we would need to update those docs just to denote that. Maybe that we, mention see the set style docs. This delegates each style entry to set style. Something like that. You know, you could do a lot more with the documentation here. It's a good starter. It just needs to be something that people understand. And, you know, having other reviewers take a look at this and, you know, give feedback on your documentation. Did you explain it well? Does that make sense? Will help. And I'm sure you guys would have some ideas too on better way to document that. But for the most part, you know, this would be all you would need to do. So it looks like setup. Setup has this is just code that gets directly pushed up, or the setup page in the docs. So CableReady has that setup page. Basically, this is mapping directly to this markdown file on Gitbook, and that gets published whenever this gets updated. So if you merged in these changes to the documentation for set styles, then that would be automatic. So let's go ahead, create a new branch, multiple styles, set multiple styles. We can add our changes here. So we have documentation for it. What changed there? That looks the same. Maybe there's white space changes. Not sure. We'll add these. Don't need that. Let's get restore docs. What was it? Usage that had that line that didn't seem to change. This one here. No, that was in the README, so we'll do that. Yeah, docs, README. So we added that one, and we'll leave that one out, and that. So that should give us the minimal version or changes we actually made on purpose. Then we can say allow setting multiple styles on an element at once. Make our commit. I don't know why that's taking so long. Try it again. There it goes. We'll get push up to my fork. And actually get remote show origin will be Hopsoft's version. So we'll say get remote rm origin, get remote add origin, get at github.com, exit 3, CableReady.get, get push -u, origin set multiple styles. And we should be up on there. So we need to make sure that we run the standardized stuff to make sure any of our changes we made don't conflict. So we'll run /bin standardize. Run bundle to make sure we can have pry-nav in there. That should take care of running standard and prettier standard on there for us. Okay. So it looks like that made a change to changer quotes. Simple enough, okay. Say standardize. and we'll push that up as well. Okie dokie. So if we go to our fork of this on GitHub, should have our branch, and we can check and see if because this repository contains yeah, I don't see why not. I want to run those anyways. So I don't know if we have to push another commit in order to get that to actually run. We may need to change something in actions. Yeah, I bet it needs at once like another commit or something to do that. I mean, we could try and add like a change log or something, but we don't really have any other commits to try and trigger that action, so maybe we'll just leave it. We'll get rid of these file changes that we don't want. And we can make a pull request if we like. So we can compare and pull request our new branch we created. We'll say this adds a set styles operation. It allows for setting multiple style attributes at once on an element. And we can grab our example from the docs that we added and show that. Oops, don't need to attach a file. For example, we can set background and color at once. This actually loops through and delegates each entry to the set style operation. There we go. So we can create a pull request for this. It's something we're clearly just adding because we would like to. I think it would be really useful. There's definitely already been a couple times where I'm like, if I'm going to show an example of this, I don't want to have to write a bunch of those Ruby commands. And so it's nice to be able to do that all together and loop through these. Potentially, we want to include a link to this if object.entries not supporting IE is a problem. So maybe we'll mention that here at the bottom. We'll say this depends upon object.entries that isn't supported in IE. That's an issue, and we can link to object.entry, or the docs for entries on MDN. I don't think that's going to be a concern, but it is something we should mention just in case it is, because we don't really know what browsers CableReady is targeting right now. I think it's modern browsers, but we would want to be sure of that. The other thing we can probably do is go into CableReady and look up, see if entries is in here, and it looks like maybe it's doing, I guess maybe they're doing the old style of entries.length and looping through those. We can look at one of the WebSocket messages and see probably, and just compare and see if maybe we should use what they're already using. So we'll refresh and get our cable channel, go to messages, let's broadcast another update, and take a look at this and see if we can compare this JSON object to that. So operations morph, set styles. Yeah, I bet that this is doing that. So it's going through for let name and operations. Operations has own property name. Okay, so what is going on here? So we're calling perform, and we have written, like in our example in our JavaScript channel, we call perform data.operation. So we give it the array, this array of operations, or no, that is an object. Okay. So it's probably using then, it's grabbing all the keys in there, and then it's getting the array of entries, and then it's looping through the entries. So it's using for let name in operations. The other thing, I guess, is that the Webpack compile could compile this down maybe with compatibility. I'm not sure. I haven't done too much of that for targeting older browsers with Webpacker. So maybe it's something we don't have to worry about. It does look like this is fairly modern stuff, like let name an object. It's kind of the same thing. We're just like for let an object entry. So maybe we could try this and see if that works. We would need to do that in our node module folder to test. Let's open that up, or we can go, we already got this open, here we go. Node modules, CableReady. CableReady.js, and we could try this. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but we can see. Bin Webpack. Okay, refresh our page, open up the JavaScript console. Yeah, non-iterable instance. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. For constant property in object property, what is the browser compatibility for this? Okay, so that works way back to Chrome version 1, Firefox 1. Oh my God, that's awesome. Yeah, so potentially, that is maybe what we should be doing instead, because that definitely does work a lot older, or with a lot of older browsers. So let's paste in that example, say styles, and then we would say const name is styles property. Or name is property, value is, I think that would be right. So that would grab the name, like background, and then the value of background, and set that. That would be very, very browser compatible, which would be great. I'll refresh this. Switch to test 2. Let's go back as well to our card.rb and fix that, or change this back to, say, red. We'll reload, We'll say test. Oops. Yeah, card. Reload, and now we'll change it to test 1. Okay. So test 1 is set. We can refresh our page. We can redo this again. Test 2 changes that, and it works as we would expect it to. So I think that is a better way of writing this. That way we get our property in a more browser compatible way. We'll replace that one line with an extra line. Makes it a little bit longer code-wise, but honestly really not bad. And then we can go to the branch here. Improve browser compatibility. So this maybe isn't necessary to do that. Maybe object.entries is a better way to do it. We can say, depending on browser compatibility, targets or goals. Using object.entries instead. So that is, another option there. Let's go to now that we push this up, it should be running on our fork, the GitHub actions. Hopefully, maybe not. So multiple styles, I would think, would be running the GitHub actions. It may not be, depending on how those are set up. So let's go look at this. GitHub workflows, standard RB. Okay, so on push to master and then pull request branches. So it's not going to run these until we create a pull request. That's fine. We don't have to worry about that then. So if we push this up as an actual pull request, then we should see that that works or starts to run those. Okay, so we see them in a running code climate. I would assume this is also going to add, there we go, the GitHub actions. And we'll see if those pass as well. We can run bin standardize 2, just in case we missed something in our changes, which we could have, but nothing I can think of. Maybe it doesn't like things on the same line. It's very possible. Yep. So let's standardize. Yeah, we'll have to get into the habit of doing that sooner than later. But that will fix our errors there and improve that. So should pass this time around. Now I accidentally committed, looks like, the other branch that I had, or those changes for this detail stuff. So possibly we could delete that, commit, and yeah, we shouldn't have that other change inside of here at the same time, because that is not really what we wanted. Yeah. So one of the things we can do is like revert these commits and force push. Not the greatest, it'll work. Yeah, wait for the standard RB to pass. This should pass. We didn't really change any Ruby code at all, so not a big deal. Just wait for that to finish. Yay, and we passed. Cool. So, yeah, we should probably go back and just get rid of that because that's not supposed to be in here. That's in the other pull request I made, which was a couple hours ago when I was fiddling with adding that. And that was where this was supposed to be. Cool. So, I wonder too, like, I know console log throws an error in Internet Explorer version something. So I wonder if that would actually throw an actual error in Internet Explorer. Probably have to channel. Set styles. Yeah, so we've got this new method to add here, CableReady.js. Okay, and docs. So setup, or readme rather. And style mutations. Okay, we'll grab that from the GitHub too. I think that was it. We got that. We got that. We need this. We did that. Set styles. We don't need that change again because my editor removes empty spaces at the end of lines, so that should be fine. And yeah, should be good. Add set styles operation. There we go. So force push that up and we should be back in business. And then this PR should be updated to show the force push. There it goes. And there we go. So that's back in business and I think we're good. And that's probably all we'll do today on this live stream. I didn't really have anything planned exactly, but I think that is more than enough. And we've been going for like an hour and a half, I guess. Something like that. A lot longer than I thought. So it's good. We'll wait until this standard RB finishes and runs. I think we're good. Guess we can run bin standardize too and just see if we missed anything. But I think we'll be fine. Yep, looks like it. Okay. Fantastic. For some reason, these logs are not like openable. For some reason, I'm sure GitHub knows about it, but like it's really weird. It's clearly logging, but it takes a while to load these logs, or it's running and it just doesn't have content yet, but you can't open it. It feels like you should be able to open it with or without it having any details in there. Strange. Okie dokie. Now we have our commit that is a little bit more concise, because it is fully separate from the other one. That was my mistake. So yeah, there we go. I think we are good, and we've made a contribution. Hopefully that gets merged into CableReady, and we can be on the contributors list, which is awesome. So I think that's it for this stream. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you like these and want to see more of them, let me know in the comments, because most of the time I'm doing screencasts. These are a little bit slower because they're not as concise and as polished. But if you like seeing the actual workflow and stuff, let me know in the comments. This is really fun to do, so I'd like to do some more if you guys enjoy them. So I'd love to hear back from you. Cool. All right. See you guys.